On today's episode of 7-Minute Expert, Donald Trump puts tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. The currency of all of these countries collapses, and the United States is once again on top of the world. And why the Canadian conservatives are secretly happy about it. I'm Gideon Askowitz, and this is 7-Minute Expert. So over the weekend, we saw Donald Trump make good on his word, as we knew he would. He put tariffs on Canada and on Mexico, and then most recently on the CCP, on the Chinese Communist Party. And a lot of liberals and a lot of the globalists are freaking out, and they're saying that this is going to cause inflation and this is terrible. And as usual, when all of those people are freaking out, you know that you're doing the right thing. So why is Trump doing this, and why is it the right thing? So primarily Trump is doing it because there are a lot of trade issues, and he wants to get a better deal for the American taxpayer when we're doing trade with these countries, but also because there's a serious issue of fentanyl that's pouring across the borders into our country, and the Mexicans and the Canadians and the Chinese are all complicit in that. And the China has additional concerns, and that's why Trump is putting tariffs on them as well. But essentially, all of it is to get into a better bargaining position when we go to the table and say, we need to renegotiate. The basic premise of the criticism of the liberals is as follows, and the globalists is as follows. They basically say that you need unfettered free trade, and up until recently, that was the position of the Republican Party. However, the Republican Party has recently become more conservative. And what does that mean? That means an actual understanding of what it means to have an economy and a nation state. The economy is here to serve the people, not the other way around. What does it mean for the country's economy to serve it? What that basically means is that we don't exist as workers in a factory all trying to produce for the mother of all nations of the economy. No, purpose of the economy in the United States is to better the citizens of the United States. And if the total sum of a trade agreement is to the detriment of the people of the United States, then we shouldn't agree to that free trade agreement. Or to the trade agreement, however it's construed. So what Trump is saying is to listen, Trudeau, we can't have the trade agreement as it is. We need a better trade agreement. And more importantly, there are a lot of issues. There's some fentanyl coming across your border. And especially, obviously, with the Mexicans, there's a ton of fentanyl coming across the border. We can't have that. That's horrifying, and we can't have that. Obviously, that's correct. So what he's saying is that we're going to put a tariff on you until you come to the table. Now, I think that the Canadians are actually going to cave first. And why do I think that?
I intend to resign as party leader, as prime minister.
So in that video, he had to step down because he basically ruined their entire country, and he's still in power, but only while they look for a new head of government. And once they have to call Parliament back into session to deal with this issue, then he's going to end up being forced out. And what's going to end up happening is that Pierre Poilievre, the head of the Conservative Party, who's super charismatic, is going to end up taking over the government of Canada. And Pierre, for his part, is acting like he's really upset by these tariffs. Now, take a look at this.
My message to the Liberal government: put aside partisan interests and recall Parliament. It is insane that in this great crisis, Parliament is shut down to deal with a crisis and a power struggle within the Liberal Party.
Not happy about the tariffs, but that's not true. He is, and the Conservatives are thrilled. Why? Because this means that when these tariffs are levied, as they are, it's going to cause a serious issue in the Canadian economy. There's going to be massive inflation, and there are going to be people who are laid off in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. And that means that when these elections are called, the Liberals are going to get shellacked, and the Conservatives are going to have a great, great win up in Canada. And good for them. And that's going to be better for us as well. Now, after that happens, the Mexicans will eventually have to cave because we are a massive part of their economy, and eventually they just can't withstand the economic pressure. But she will last longer because she has a much more popular mandate than does Trudeau. Now, all of that said, what is the expected effect? So if we quickly take a look at some of these graphs, you can see the real GDP, the expected effect of these tariffs on the U.S. economy and relative to the expected effects on the Canadian and Mexican economies, both in terms of real GDP. And you see a dip for all countries, but it's most sharply severe for the Canadians, and over time it's the worst for the Mexican economy. And then you see those inflation numbers, and already we're beginning to see those inflation numbers being realized. The Canadian dollar and the Mexican peso are collapsing today. And you also see that when you look at the expected effects of these tariffs with trade with China. And those are all real concerns for many Americans, that inflation is going to be felt. Now, what I'm curious about is I don't know why Trump didn't do these tariffs in stages, which is what I would have done. I would have put a tariff on Canada and Mexico first, let the Chinese see that we mean business, and then hopefully avoid putting tariffs on them and being able to renegotiate with them. And what that would also do is it would avoid having too many tariffs in place at the same time, because when you have that, those inflationary effects compound. And we want to avoid that because that's going to hurt Americans in the short term. And those who are most vulnerable will obviously feel that the most. And that's something that should be avoided. So I'm curious why Trump didn't do the tariffs in that order to try to separate their effects and ultimately achieve our national interests as he sees them. And I think as he rightly sees them, as we all see them as well. Now, I am pretty confident that ultimately this will be to the betterment of our country, and that's why I think overall we should support them. But I am curious, and I'd like to know why he did it in this way. If you guys have any thoughts on that, please leave a comment in the section below. Now, one last thing that we have to talk about is the other issues with China that we're seeing over the weekend that goes into this calculus for Trump, which is there is something called BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And these countries are beginning to build alternative institutions to the ones that we use to control the global trade and the economy and all those things as the United States superpower. Those are called the Bretton Woods institutions. Those are the Western institutions. And the Chinese are basically saying that they're going to build and continue to build their alternatives. And Trump is saying no to that. And that is something that we just need to keep our eyes on. And that's a really important component of a lot of these tariffs. And we can actually expect more tariffs on China if they don't cut out some of their BRICS activity. If you found this episode helpful, please leave a like and subscribe. Share it with your friends and family. I'm Gideon Askowitz, and this is 7 Minute Expert.